Hello, everybody. Welcome to Inside the Answer Gap, how leading brands are winning visibility in the era of AI. I'm Rebecca Colwell, your host. I'm the SVP of Marketing at Yext. I am so excited about our attendees today and our special guest. But before I introduce our esteemed guest, I wanted to take a minute to thank all of you for being here and to acknowledge the reality of the situation that we are in as marketers today. It is a wild time to be a marketer. Things are changing really quickly and it can feel really hard to keep up, right? Consumers are searching differently. The factors that drive brand visibility are changing, and the nature of our day-to-day job is changing too. And it's a lot to process. But here's the thing. As marketers, we have been doing this for a really, really long time, literally thousands of years, and our jobs have always evolved. So the very first evidence of marketing was found 5,000 years ago on a piece of papyrus in Egypt. It was an ad for like a men's fabric maker. And 1,500 years later, when the Gutenberg printing press came along, we could actually scale marketing for the first time. 500 years after that, we got radio, which made it, expanded beyond written word, and then television came along and made it cinematic, and then social came along, and now we are in the era of AI. And every single one of these transitions felt really seismic to the people who were living through it, and they required us to learn something new and different. The marketers who moved early and understood the new system and the new playbook won. And so here today, to help us understand how to win in that new era, are two of the most recognizable and impressive voices in search right now, people who have helped shape the playbook and are now actively redefining it. So first, I'm super excited to introduce Mike King, the founder and CEO of iPullRank. Mike is a longtime force in the SEO community, the mastermind behind SEO Week, which is one of the biggest and most important SEO gatherings in the industry. He's worked with brands like Amex, SAP, HSBC, and he has never been shy about challenging how search actually works. Mike, so good to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Rebecca. Super excited to be here.
Excellent. And I'm also thrilled to be joined by Jason Hamrick, who is the Principal Strategist of Data and Insights at Phase 2. Mike is deep in the technical realities about what it takes to actually show up in AI-driven search. And he's not just talking about it, he is in there every day, figuring it out in real time. So Jason, super excited to have you as well.
Thank you.
So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask a very quick question. We're going to launch a poll to everyone in the audience. Have a quick question. In the past month, have you used an AI chat tool like ChatGPT or Gemini to search for local products and services? Restaurants, healthcare providers, home services. And while we're waiting for those results to come in, Mike, Jason, I'm really curious. I'm assuming your answer to this question is yes.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, God, yes, of course.
Okay. Ooh, thank goodness. So what was the latest thing that you searched for and what kind of results did you get back?
I'm remodeling my kitchen, so I've been searching for kitchen countertops, the different kinds, what's the pros and cons of each, and then where can I find them here in DC. So that's been my latest conversations with AI at home.
That's fun. Yeah. I'm redoing my bathroom, and so I'm kind of in like tile chaos as well.
I'm familiar.
Yeah. What about you, Mike?
For me, I was just looking for restaurants, just trying to get out of my comfort zone for things that I always go to. And I was like, sure, I could just type in, neighborhood restaurants or whatever into Google, but I was curious what I would get from ChatGPT. And so got a couple, recommendations that I wouldn't have thought of otherwise.
Excellent. Did you try them?
It's on my list for tomorrow, so I'm going to go through that a bit later.
Cool. We'll check back and see how it went. Excellent. Well, it looks like we just closed the poll. We are trending at 68% of the people who said yes, they have. That tracks. We just conducted a consumer survey last month, 1,200 consumers in the U.S. And we found that 47% of US adults are using AI for local search within the past month. So this audience, a little more tech forward. And we found that 59% of people who search every day are using LLMs. So really curious, does this data surprise you at all? Mike, maybe we'll start with you.
Oh, not at all. I mean, it aligns with like some of the research that we've been doing on our side, leveraging like the different clickstream tools and so on. So yeah, I mean, the growth is substantial across all vectors that you would expect.
Absolutely. What about you, Jason?
Oh, really the same. I think that those numbers might be even undercounting what we're seeing. The growth and rise and how often people return to continue a search or start a new conversation. I think it's what's really interesting for us.
Absolutely. Well, I really want to dig into the why. I mean, it's clear the data is clearly showing it's happening, but what is the trigger in the consumer behavior? So, Mike, let's start with you. I'd love your perspective. Why do you think consumers are shifting to AI search?
Because consumers never wanted 10 blue links. They wanted answers. They wanted the ability to have something like take action on their behalf and like proactively give them responses that are very aligned with their context. And the reality is that that technology, supports all those things. And as it continues to evolve, it's going to be more like, again, proactive and figuring out based on things in your house or in your email and things like that. It's going to automatically bring those answers or take action on your behalf. So, really users always wanted like assisted. They didn't want to have to like read a bunch of results and then synthesize the information themselves.
Yeah. Multiple tabs, just flipping through all the time, like trying to make sense of what I found. Jason, what do you think? Anything else driving this?
I think Mike's right, but I think there are a couple other things. 10 blue links sufficed when there was no other option. But 10 blue links have gotten worse. I think we all know that for the consumer, Google search is not as good as it was 5 years ago. It's now the first 8 links are going to be sponsored results or knowledge graph or something else. So even if I was trying to use 10 blue links, I couldn't. And then for publishers, people who actually write content, Google broke the social contract, the search contract. Like there was this implicit agreement, like I'm going to let you index my site, you will send me traffic. But with the growth of ads and then the growth of zero click, even before this AI movement during zero click, that contract is broken. So 10 blue links has become less and less attractive. And it wasn't, to Mike's point, even the thing we really wanted, it was the thing we had. And then at the same time, in that middle area, Alexa and voice assistants came along right at that same time, sort of training people to have a conversation that did include context from their life. So I feel like you put all those things together and the rise of AI search kind of seems inevitable.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I'm really curious with that rise of conversational search. We wanted to understand too if people are choosing to search differently, like are we tackling new use cases? And so my hypothesis coming in was that it was going to be deep research, and that is in fact the top use case, but it tied with quick answers. It was like, okay, Jason, you and I are looking to remodel different rooms in our homes. We're going deep down the rabbit hole. Mike, you're like, find a restaurant. It is being used for everything. And so I'm really curious how this resonates with you and why you think consumers are just using it all over the place.
I think part of it is that, the complexity of a need has always been difficult in search. Like you used to have to perform multiple queries and then kind of like in your head, put together your own conclusion. And, Google search has gotten a lot better at understanding complex queries, but these conversational queries where it's like, I don't want to have to, convert what I'm looking for into Orwellian newspeak. Like, I just want to kind of vomit this idea and then have this system give me the answer that I need. So, yeah, I mean, I think everything we're seeing here makes complete sense, right? Like, you want the quick recommendation. You don't want to have to, contort your brain to figure out how to ask for it. You want the thorough research because you don't want to have to, read 50 different blog posts to figure something out. So all of this makes sense to me that, users are using it for these use cases.
Yeah, I think that's right, Mike. I mean, we talk about short tail searches or long tail searches, those are really long multi-word queries. That was just someone's attempt to get around the Orwellian newspeak and actually start to have a conversation. People didn't really want to search anyway. We all wanted to have the conversation. So now I open up ChatGPT or Claude. We don't think about it as searching. We think about it as I'm looking for a restaurant. I'm trying to find kitchen countertops. I'm trying to find a pediatrician that takes my insurance. And so that conversational approach, just like we would have if we were actually talking to a friend or an expert who was sitting in the room next to us, is what we've always wanted.
Yeah,
And
I think you're right.
It.
It's really interesting too, because just as a final point on this, we wanted to then understand, what do people do at the end of that conversation? Are they actually taking action on the recommendations that they get from AI? So we first asked, how much do you trust the recommendations? And we're seeing this increase over time, which is great. But then we asked, what do you do? And almost every single person does something else first. They go to Google, go to the website, they go to social, they check their reviews. So it's always like a trust but verify kind of thing. So I also just really want, explain this to me. But why are they taking that secondary action?
I'm super happy to see this because that previous slide scared me. Like the fact that everyone is just like, or most people were kind of like trusting things at face value. But, again, this also aligns with a lot of the data that we've seen where it's like, it was something like 40% of all users of ChatGPT leave there and go to Google afterwards. And, that makes sense. Like, people are just, like you said, looking to verify. They understand that these systems hallucinate. They understand that, looking at the underlying sources will give them more trust in what they're believing or what they're looking at and so on. And, again, it makes sense to me that the pattern is that verification. And I'm happy to see that.
Yeah, I think that really shows the power and importance of citations. Because if my next click is not going to be to the end result, but to be, to go to ZocDoc, to go to some review site, to go to a social place for that social reputation, that social proof. This really aligns with what we're seeing and what we're both seeing in the data, but also what we're hearing from user interviews, what we're hearing in usability studies. Like, folks are still going to want that social verification and that reputation check, because they do expect hallucinations. To expect hallucinations, I think now is a new wrinkle in the search experience and the conversation experience, because 10 blue links were verifiable in some way. They were,
or at least you trusted them.
At least you trusted them, right? Because they felt verifiable. And if I clicked through and read the result and it wasn't what I needed, it was on the publisher for giving me wrong information, not on Google for giving me wrong information, right? Like, where does the responsibility lie for the answer being correct? There's always this underlying problem, and now that responsibility is shifted upstream.
It's a really good point. I've been thinking, just the idea that people are verifying the answers that they're getting from LLMs. Part of it might be that it's just a black box. Like, we have at least semblance of understanding of how Google decides to rank things, but we have very little visibility as people and as marketers. So let's get into that piece of the conversation about how does AI go about answering a complex question like this. So Mike, do you want to kick us off? Like, what's your perspective, or how would you explain this to my mom?
Oh, as far as how it works? Well, so basically the way it works is that the large language model takes the prompt that the user puts in, and then it extrapolates to a series of what we call synthetic queries in the background. And then it performs all these searches, and then it pulls pieces of content and feeds that to the language model to then generate the response. So that's why we say that like organic search is still a very big component of it, even though it does require like a different subset of things to do in order to get the visibility in those channels.
Yeah, and that process, like we call that RAG, retrieval augmented generation, and the R, the retrieval, is why SEO is so foundational to good GEO. Because to Mike's point, at some point in that process, and it's probably going to happen in 2 or 3 or 4 cycles, there will be some kind of retrieval to some source document, or more to the point, some source chunk of text that gets pulled back into that response. So I think it's really important, as we're talking about how this happens, why it happens, to be successful in this era. I think it is really important that publishers understand that RAG model. You're not just trying to get discovered in 10 blue links. Now you got to win 3 separate actions. You've got to get retrieved. You've got to get selected from everything that's retrieved, because the LLM does make choices and rank the information that it retrieves, and then you've got to get cited. So instead of having sort of one big job, now we've got 3 smaller separate jobs, and see 3 separate things to think about, like being retrieved, being selected, being cited. Understanding those things, like you sort of stop thinking about pages and start thinking about answer chunks, and like what is something that's discrete, that's defensible, that's correct,
Right.
and it is easy to be cited. So
I love that.
Yeah, I think
we're going to get into the content piece in a minute about creating content and ensuring that your pages are cited. But I wanted to dig in a bit to the sources of information that an LLM trusts when it's answering a question. So I have one more slide, and then I think we're done. But so Yext Research did a citation study, 17.2 million citations just in this past quarter, and we focused on a local search query. So I know that there are a lot of different tools out there to measure visibility on an LLM, but in particular, we wanted to dig into how it would answer a question like this. So this is a question: where's the best Italian restaurant in Midtown Manhattan with gluten-free pasta and late-night dining? Mike, I was doing this in anticipation of my trip to New York for SEO Week. It's like, where am I going to have dinner? And what we found is, the LLM is going out and it is citing a lot of different types of information to answer that question. The subjective component of what is the best, it's likely to look at review sites. When we look for more specific things like gluten-free or late night dining, this is going to look at my website or pages. And when we rolled this all up, what we found is that there were 4 categories of citations for searches with local intent. 47% of those citations tracked back to a first-party website or a local page. 44% went back to listings and directories like a Google business profile. 5% or so went to review sites and social, and then 4% would be in that category of news and forums and Reddit. What reaction do you have to this data? I know it's a little bit different than some of the other stuff we've seen out there.
So I read the study when it came out. It was really interesting. And what's interesting, I think, is putting those first 2 together, websites and listings. I think your research was that 62% of searches include both of those in the response. So 40% of one, 40% of the other, but 62% contain both. To me, that speaks to the importance of brand reputation and understanding positive brand mentions across the web. That it used to be success, at least as we understood it, happen on the site, on your own website, on the place you control. And it's slowly grown. And now you do need to think about your listings and your Google business profiles and your Wikipedia page and your ZocDoc and all these other places where your brand is going to be mentioned. For content creators, marketers, kind of blends those 2 ideas together. And now I've got this bigger universe of information I need to think about as being under my control.
Yeah, when we talk about this, like we talk about how it's not just about your website, it's about your content
Hmm.
ecosystem. And so in the
Yeah.
local environment, of course, it's largely like these sorts of sites. But when we think about this broader for like how this works across all the different types of search that happen, you also got to think about things like, video and so on. Like
Hmm.
video tends to be one of the most cited sources after Reddit and things like that. So
Yeah.
you really got to think about this kind of more similar to like how you do a reputation management campaign than
Hmm.
how you would do like a classic SEO campaign.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so like a classic SEO campaign is like, okay, you're targeting a keyword and it's like you align it with this one landing page on your site. In this case, you got to think about, what are we doing in with reviews? What are we doing with video? What are we
Hmm.
doing in our digital PR so that we make sure that we have those messages that we want out there in a variety of spaces so that when the model goes out and goes to all these different things, there's consensus across that information.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And Mike, something you said just really made me remember, made me reflect on the importance of consistency
Hmm.
in that brand, because the model is going to look not only at your site, but across all those sources. And it wants to see the same brand name with the exact same words and the same phone number in every single place, and the same address and opening hours every single place. So having that
Hmm.
consistency of information across that ecosystem, reputation management, it's a different kind of content management, a different kind of content strategy than maybe a lot of people have been thinking about.
It was interesting to see how many web pages, brand-owned sites or
Mm-hmm.
brand-owned pages are cited. So as a marketer, what do I need to do to make sure it's my pages that are getting referenced and not my competitors' pages?
Yeah, so that's where it gets very granular and
Mm-hmm.
requires like significant effort. So really the first step from my perspective is understanding one, what is your audience actually searching for? Like what are the prompts they're putting in and so on. And then mapping that to those synthetic queries, right? Like different tooling provides it differently. So as an example, ChatGPT, you can extract it from the like the API response, and a lot of
Mm-hmm.
tools are surfacing that data. But as another example, with Gemini, they're not surfacing that. So you basically have to like replicate it in Gemini itself. And so the whole point is that you got to identify what those queries are and then see how well you rank for those synthetic queries. And then you have to look at your content itself and like restructure it so it's better aligned with the expectations. But another layer of this is that there's a format expectation for each one of those synthetic queries. So in some cases, they
Mm-hmm.
may be looking for video for this query, or they may be looking for a checklist and so on. So you got to also like determine that and see how your content aligns with that expectation. And then from there, it's really about like republishing it and making sure that it's accessible and so on. But the measurement component of this is like really where you need to be
Yeah.
focused because you need to see like how well are you doing for these sorts of things, and then what is the impact of these various operations that you do to improve that visibility.
Like so many things you just said, like I've got 3 or 4 things I want to talk about, but you mentioned synthetic queries, you mentioned like those grounding queries. Uh, for folks who haven't been paying, haven't been really in the know, Bing is the only place so far that has actually visibly shown you the grounding query. So Bing updated their webmaster tools in mid-February with an AI performance layer. So you can actually see what are the grounding queries that folks are using in Copilot. How are those translating into the pages? Some of the same information that we're used to having within Google Search Console, Bing is now starting to display, at least in the UI of Bing Webmaster Tools. So that's a really valuable place to actually see what's going on. What's that ground truth? It's not yet in their API, so it's not, we can't run it programmatically, but we're getting there. And hopefully Bing's actions will point the way and encourage the others to release that same data. I think everything that Mike said about the process of the content is right. I think there's an underlying assumption there, which is that your SEO right is currently optimized right now. And for a lot of folks, they might not even be in that place yet. So it might be a step 0 or a step 1 is revisiting, I'll call it traditional SEO, not quite keyword SEO because we're not in 2010 anymore, but at least what is modern SEO look like? What are the best practices for technical SEO, for on-page SEO? Do you understand what core web vitals are and how to impact them? A lot of those things shouldn't feel like SEO, like a separate job. At this point, they should be baked into your content operations. Accessibility should be baked into content operations. Understanding audiences and intent should be baked into your content writing operations. So GEO, SEO should be a layer that sort of emerges almost organically out
I agree with that.
of all that work.
I agree with that. Like SEO as a function actually shouldn't exist. Like if everyone, if all these other capabilities just took the specifications and layered them in, there would be no SEO.
Yeah, we say at phase 2, SEO isn't a thing you do, it's a thing you get. Do all the other things you know you should be doing to manage your content, to talk to your audiences, to understand relationships, to manage your reputation. And at least the foundation of SEO should follow. So when these new things come along, right, you're just tweaking for voice, or you're tweaking for an answer engine instead of having to start from the ground.
Well, out of curiosity, you said when these new ideas come along. So I'm hearing a lot of different pieces of advice from a lot of people out there about this little trick or this little trick that'll boost your visibility in AI. I'm curious how much of that's bullshit and how much of that could actually have like a negative impact on like your core strategy. You know, are we getting to this era of little hacks that are going to decrease our visibility overall?
In AI, or what do you mean? I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. So I hear things like, oh, you know what I should do is just put the year 2026 in all my blog headlines, or go post a bunch of like, just like, you know, just crazy little things like that, right? Crank out thousands of pages on my website.
Yeah, I mean, that works, you know, and it's worked for classic search for a long time, like just really focusing on those long tail queries because there's just not a lot out there, or historically there wasn't a lot out there that align with it. And so you make like 1 million pages and they each get like, you know, 5 visits a month and you're happy. You're like, wow, like I got 5 million visits. And a lot of people are doing that for the generative AI side as well. And you're seeing a lot of these, you know, people are calling it Mount AI, these charts where things kind of like spike and then they drop off over time. But that's not just a function of the fact that it's AI, right? Like it's really that people are building this content with poor UX, because Google cannot reliably say like, hey, this one signal, oh, you use generative AI for this content. Like it's not a reliable signal for them. So what they do is they just review that content like they do any other content and then look at the user signals. And generative AI content tends to have high bounce rates, low time on site. So, you know, it's not just like, hey, like do that tactic and then you burn through things right away. Like if you do it the right way and it is valuable content that is saying something net new, it can still be valuable to your approach. And then the idea of doing the little hacks, like, you know, adding 2026 to things, or, you know, serving markdown versus, you know, regular HTML. I mean, the 2026 thing has worked, and because they're looking for that recency. But the markdown thing, I haven't seen have any like actual, you know, result, even though we're starting to see like CDNs adopted and things like that. So you should expect, like, yes, there's going to be a lot of hacks that pop up, and perhaps, you know, OpenAI will start to get into that same sort of flow as Google, where they attack those sort of adversarial tactics. But like for now, OpenAI doesn't have any guidelines, so there is no quote unquote black hat GEO.
The idea of Mount AI, you're right. Like you can create all these programmatic pages, and everyone talks about climbing the mountain, and no one talks about why did you descend it? Usually it's because a new Google update came out, and that's where your peak is. And all those programmatic pages that you built now have zero, small, negative value. The 2026 thing, it works until I think one day soon it won't. LLMs.txt doesn't work. It's a solution in search of a problem. Markdown files, I don't think are important for humans right now, but as we move into the agentic, like truly into the agentic age, there might be some value in Markdown just to manage token usage in the same way that there's a little bit of value in managing crawl budget in traditional SEO, just to help direct the bot a little bit and be a little bit more friendly to the bot, especially given that, aside from Googlebot, none of the other crawlers understand JavaScript. So simplifying your content, there's a world in which 6 months from now, a year from now, we'll be glad that we started to put markdown files, sort of markdown files alongside our HTML.
I have a quick final section here before we get to the Q&A, because we have a lot of great questions coming through. Mindset shifts. So everybody in anticipation of this event had this big question: is SEO dead?
I have thoughts.
Oh, it's not.
Go ahead, Jason.
No, is SEO dead? No, because as we've been talking about, it's just the sum of all these other operations you should be doing. It's just a blanket we put around all of that to try and understand it and make it feel like it's a service instead of 10 or 15 different services. So is SEO dead? No, I think in this moment, SEO is changing. It's probably becoming a little more technical than we are used to. It requires an additional set of skills, an additional set of understanding, probably a little more focus on data science, a little more focus on mathematics than we're used to, but it's not dead, no.
Mike, what do you think?
So SEO is not dead, but it's deprecated. And what I mean by that is like what people have been doing for the last, 20 years, like the whole checklist culture of like, oh, make the page title 60 characters and all this sort of stuff. Like that is getting diminishing returns. And the modern form of what people should have been doing that hasn't really caught on, is more what you're seeing people that are good at GEO doing, right? Like they are adopting and adapting to a lot of the things that Jason was just saying, like being more like data scientists and so on. And, what we're seeing is that the folks that, have been doing it that kind of obsolete way are kind of scrambling for like, how do we recover traffic? And they don't really know what to do. And we're in a space where everything is being built right in front of us. There's like open source equivalents to everything that, OpenAI and Google are building. So we can know precisely how it works and create kind of like simulated environments where you can make adjustments to see what the impact is going to be. And, a lot of SEO software has been obsolete for so long. And that's part of why we are so behind what these platforms are doing. So just as an example, there are technically three forms of search from like an information retrieval perspective. There's lexical search, which is basically counting the incidence rates and distributions of words. There's semantic, where you leverage AI to understand meaning. And then there's hybrid, where you combine the two. Google has been semantic since like 2013. And all in their hybrid, they've been hybrid for like 7 or so years. And all these LLM platforms are hybrid as well. But almost all SEO software is still lexical. So it's giving you insights and telling you to do things that don't actually matter that much in the environments that you're trying to optimize for. So yeah, SEO is deprecated. And in fact, the name doesn't even make sense. We're not optimizing search engines. You're also not optimizing answer engines or generative engines. Like the people that work at those companies are optimizing those. What you're doing is feature engineering your website so that it's more performant in these environments. So like, I don't think any of these names actually make sense.
Well, you anticipated my next question. Do you have a name that you would call it instead?
Yeah, so what we do at iPullRank, we call relevance engineering, and it's really the confluence of information retrieval, AI, UX, content strategy, and digital PR. And I think the main difference is that you can be an SEO and not know how anything works, whereas this sort of relevance engineer knows how things works and can identify the edge cases and the opportunities to optimize accordingly. It's not waiting for some SEO software company to write a blog post and say like, hey, here's how you do it. It's like we figure it out ourselves and kind of get back to the core ethos of how SEO started. Like I think a lot of people may not understand that SEO was born from web developers. They were like people that were like, hey, let's figure out how this works. It's like back when, the only title was webmaster and you did everything. And then that splintered into this role of SEOs who like, we're just testing all these like IR concepts to figure out how things actually work.
Yeah, so we call those what Mike calls relevance engineering, we call content engineering. It's the same idea. It's a person who is just as comfortable talking about audiences and user experience and content strategy as they are cracking up and understanding schema and JSON files and spinning up Python and doing work inside NLP and natural language processing and all those sorts of things. It's a strange confluence of skills that goes beyond trying to reverse engineer the black box that was the Google index. And to Mike's point, we don't have to re-engineer the black box anymore. We can create simulations if we have the time and the patience and the skill.
Right. I love that. It sounds like marketing teams are becoming less siloed, or at least less hyper specialized in particular areas, and we're looking for people who have like a broader sense of thinking. So I'm curious, in this mindset shift question, do we need to be thinking about our teams differently and the talent that we have on our teams to meet this new era?
Absolutely. Like the skill sets need to evolve. And everyone has new capabilities as a function of generative AI. I saw someone in the chat say like, hey, just vibe code it. I mean, you can't. There's a lot of things you can just build at this point. And to the idea of breaking down silos, like you cannot truly do well in generative environments without breaking down those silos. Like you needed that for SEO to begin with, but it is like foreclosed on. And this is the challenge that I have with people that are saying generative AI is just SEO. When you put it back in that box, all the executives are like, oh, okay, cool, then sit in this corner and do meta tags. Like you're not going to get resources. You're not going to be able to work cross-functionally when you put it in something that's already defined. Now we have that opportunity to say, okay, if we want to do this, this is the tiger team that we need in order to achieve these objectives.
Yeah, I think in the same way that SEO was a collection of skills that got pulled together, GEO is those same collection of skills, plus probably a few others. Folks who are on your earned media team are probably now part of your GEO team. I'll say that very broadly. Marketing and communications being split functions, with earned media as a separate function and sometimes paid media being a separate function. To the extent that those silos still exist here in 2026, they are and should be converging to a single unified content calendar and a single unified content marketing calendar, communication strategy. And then it just becomes a communication, audience, and intent question rather than, oh, you're an SEO, you're an accessibility person, you're a designer, you really understand DevOps. Like, all those skills need to be able to come together. And if they're in different people, then those folks need to have a common vocabulary to talk about these kinds of problems. I think, if anything, that's where the GEO term comes from, just as a way for us to all, our different skill sets, rally around this new need.
Yeah. I love that. Okay, are we ready to go to the audience questions?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I'm
Let's
just
do it.
sorting through by the ones with the most upvotes. So folks, get your questions in there, vote on other people's. I think we've already covered this one, but I'm just going to throw it out there. Should brands be adopting the LLMS TXT standard?
Absolutely not. Doesn't do
Nope.
anything.
Don't do it.
Great. Any follow-up on that? All
Nah,
right.
it's
Not
first of
doing
all, like it's not an accepted standard. It was something that I
Right.
believe came from Anthropic, but there's no evidence that anyone is actually using it.
Right. And I just want to say, like, amplify what Mike just said. It's not just us saying this. Folks have done a lot of research on this. You know, Mark Williams-Cook, who's really well respected, has done several studies on this. Lily Ray, who's another real respected person, has done lots of studies on this. It just doesn't work.
Yeah. Okay. We have a question from Vanessa. As search evolves with AI and changing user behavior, what are 3 non-negotiable actions every SEO expert must prioritize?
One, you got to change your measurement. You can't just be measuring referral traffic. Like these AI search platforms are primarily branding channels, not performance channels. So you've got to be measuring the brand side of it and also your input metrics, because those are the things that you need to, adjust in order to get more of that visibility and traffic. And you definitely need to be digging into the whole query fan out idea. And again, you got to be thinking more about your content ecosystem rather than just your website.
3, can I have 4? So understand, everything starts with understanding your audiences, understanding their intents, how each of those intents play out across your site and across your content ecosystem. Mike already mentioned positive brand mentions, but I want to echo that because that's exactly right on. Measurement continues to be a gap. So I think we all have to understand that. So to the extent that you can get beyond thinking about SEO as trying to get people to your site, which primarily has been thought of, like think about the rest of that funnel. How are you getting people to move toward action? Because then you can connect your SEO, geo efforts to some ROI for your organization. Mike talked about trying to get resources to do all this work. That's how you get resources to do all this work. Tell that entire story.
There's a question here that has a lot of upvotes. It may be a delicate one, but there are a lot of tools right now that claim to measure AI. It says claim to measure AI features. Given the evolution of these systems, how accurate do you believe these tools are?
So I'm going to challenge this question. There's no such thing as accuracy in this sort of way, right? Like all you can really expect is precision. And the difference between that is basically, accuracy is like, is it right? Whereas precision is, does it measure the same way every time so that you can compare the results therein? And so the thing about, these sorts of things is that AI overviews are also personalized. They're probabilistic. There's going to be a different version that you might see versus what I might see. So your accuracy is like, what even is accuracy in that way? And, people talk about measuring visibility in ChatGPT as like, oh, that's going to be inaccurate. Because again, probabilistic, no two people are necessarily seeing the same thing. That is also technically true of rank tracking. For rank tracking, you are creating a context that no user actually has. Like, yes, when you're tracking on the local level, you're getting closer to a context that a user has. But when you're tracking on like the United States level, no user has that context. That's why Google is giving you averages for rankings in Google Search Console, because that is accurate. Whereas all these rank tracking tools are trying to give you like a whole number, which doesn't reflect an actual user, but it is how they measure over and over, so you're able to compare. So the answer to this is none of them are accurate, but how precise is the methodology?
And the reason that there can be accurate but not precise and not accurate, rather, is these tools are still going back to the older conversation, these tools are still mostly lexical. They are not looking at your searches because they are so personal and context dependent. They're trying to look at those grounding queries, those synthetic queries. So they're not really measuring the conversations that we're having. They're trying to measure the synthetic queries that they themselves generate, and then measure and then tell you that that's what your score is. So.
Excellent. Okay. I love this one. We believe traditional methods never fail because they focus on the customer. As a product marketer, I love that. In this age of AI search, which traditional marketing habit is the most valuable for staying visible in AI-generated answers?
Watching your reputation. Yeah, watch your reputation. That is, all other things being equal, the organization that is paying attention to their reputation across their ecosystem is going to have a better experience.
What do you think, Mike?
Right?
I mean, I would say just continuing to invest in content strategy, not just like more content for content's sake, but content in alignment with audience needs and so on is going to be like the through line pretty much for any sort of marketing, but definitely here.
Yeah. It's interesting. The survey that I was showing earlier, when we said, okay, someone gets an answer, then they go validate it through these other channels. We also asked what's the most influential piece of information to help you convert. And it did all come back to reviews and word of mouth. And then there was a small component there of social, just being familiar with a brand from social media. But I couldn't agree more on both of those. Huge proponent of reputation. And by the way, that ties back to actually just being good at what you do, right? Like getting the core business right. Just being the best. Okay.
And that's where reviews come through. Like you cannot reverse engineer positive mentions. They have to flow from real audiences having good experiences with you.
Yep, exactly. Okay, great. Leonard had a question. Which of these citation categories do you see growing most in the coming year? So I think this was in reference to the slide where we had websites, directories, reviews, and then like news and forums.
I mean, I think it's hard to say. We're seeing with the recent changes in ChatGPT 5.4 that they're doing more site colon queries. So that suggests to me that we're going to see a lot more brand websites showing up. But, everything is in flux. It's very volatile. So it's hard to know which of those categories is going to expand.
Yeah, everything is volatile. I think we're now at a place where the first party listings are going to become incrementally more important, not because of any changes to the models, but because I think folks are starting to understand the importance of that second layer of the organization, and they're paying more attention to those Google My Business results and paying more attention to reviews. As those become more accurate, more consistent, they're going to become more trusted, and you'll probably start to see LLMs cite those more often, only because they're more consistent and more trusted, not because of any larger change in the landscape.
Well, Lisa had, that went by really quick. Lisa had a related question that I just wanted to pop up, which was, is it true that ChatGPT doesn't reference Google business listings reviews? And then is it helpful to have the business name included in the business listing? Wasn't sure if either of you had insight into this one.
I don't know that they don't reference GBLs, so I can't definitively answer that one. But I would assume that the business name being in the business listing is a good idea for searchability.
Yeah. So I'm in the same place as Mike. I don't know explicitly if ChatGPT references GBL, but in that retrieval from the Google index, they will, by the chance of their property, pick up those Google business listings, even if they aren't referencing them directly. Having the business name in the business listing, yes. I think one of the things we've seen is, especially with organizations that are managing multiple tens, hundreds of individual listings, having specificity of the business name in the listing, matching what the person's going to see if they walk up to it on the street, really helps with findability inside GBL.
We have a Yext research citation study that's on our website, ungated, so anyone can check it out, about the sources of information. We can follow up with an answer on this. I saw some comments here that Gemini doesn't reference Google business profiles. What we're finding is that they are, but they're not citing them as sources because it's like they're not citing themselves. So we are seeing evidence that, of course, they're looking at that information, but it's not, maybe not coming through as a technical citation. But we've got some great research to dig into that. I have a question I would love to ask from Natalia. Can you address optimizing a website for humans versus LLMs, right? There's a lot of like create content for robots versus people or that. So what do you think?
I don't think it's a binary thing. I think that you should consider the machine just another one of your personas that you're accounting for. And at this point, I think it's not true that an LLM wants like a certain type of writing. It can understand the writing just as well as like a human at this point. So, there's like structure that performs better, meaning like don't write big walls of text, like break up your paragraph so it's easier for it to be extracted. But beyond that, like, having like a prose style can still work really well in these environments.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that, this notion that humans prefer narrative content, which is true, and machines prefer the bland uniform. Thinking about the machine as a different audience, I don't think we've really understood and really digested what that means. You have this new audience who, yes, just like a human, wants things in chunks that are understandable, an idea per paragraph with bullets and listings and all those best practices from how do we just write for people. And at the same time, those machines are great at nuance. They don't get tired. They don't get distracted. They can handle 5,000 words of a long form, dense article if that is what it takes to explain the idea. So I think there is a way in which thinking about that LLM as a new audience, it's a new type of audience that doesn't have sort of the same human foibles that we do. What does that mean for content creation? That's a really good question.
Here was a question. I think this was probably coming up from earlier in the conversation. Should you focus on prompts or topics?
I don't know how Brendan is making the distinction between the two things.
Yeah.
Because, yes, you can have a selection of prompts that make up a topic, and then you focus more on like writing broadly for that can work. But I think if you are specifically looking to perform better for a series of prompts, you got to like look at it kind of individually, because there's so much data that's happening or so many searches that are happening in the background, and you need to really like dig into that and see where your gaps are for that.
I think the value, first, I agree with Mike. I'm not quite sure how these two things are being differentiated here, but the value of thinking about topics is it encourages you to think about entities as we move into really like knowledge graph driven, vector driven ways of thinking about content, thinking about which topics you're writing for, how those map to audience and intent, how those topics map to schema entities. I think that might be a way to organize your thoughts when considering a content strategy or a writing strategy.
Okay, we are coming up on time. I think we have time for 2 more questions. So we'll pop this one up because we touched on it a little bit earlier, but the intersection of SEO, organic and paid, and so the question from Eve was, how will SEO help with paid ads showing up in AI spaces, such as AI overviews?
We don't know yet because, Google has continued to like threaten that they're going to put out ads for AI overviews, but I still haven't seen them in the wild. ChatGPT is rolling out ads. That's still really early. We don't know that those actually perform or if they're going to be adopted at scale by brands. So yeah, that information isn't publicly available yet.
Yeah, I agree with Mike. I did get my first ChatGPT ad for a local remodeler when I was doing all my kitchen work, and they are surprisingly tasteful for being ads. But I don't think we know yet how that's going to shake out. We don't have results yet. I think the only thing we know is that OpenAI had some minimum spend to take part in that pilot. That was a silly number for a minimum spend for a pilot ad campaign. It was like 250
200K
to start. Yeah, something like that to start. We don't have the data. We don't really know how that's going to shake out. I think it's really too early to say.
They have said that, the ads will not be influenced by the citations that are in the conversation, which is kind of curious.
Sure.
But I think, I feel like they're building the ship while they're flying it right now. We'll have to see how that plays out. Okay, final question, which I think is the fun one. Love the focus on right now. It's what we can control. Any forward-looking predictions for what to expect in the next 12 months? Perhaps around how LLMs will surface information versus relying on their knowledge base, or if we can expect to see changes in consumer behavior.
I expect we're going to see changes in consumer behavior as these features and functionalities mature. So like as the agentic commerce protocol and the universal commerce protocol matures, you're going to see a lot more people buying things directly in these environments. As far as like forward looking, I mean, I think what the through line of everything that we're seeing is that better structured content performs better in these environments, and having comprehensive content across a topic space is what gets you the visibility. So I would say continuing to focus there is going to be how you drive value from these platforms.
I have to agree with Mike there. I think the thing we're going to see in the next 12 months, I'm going to make one prediction, which is a continued decay of trust as we see more and more hallucinations, because of the AI slop content cycle is going to start coming full circle. And we're going to start to see AI slop being cited more and more and more in the base training models and in the responses. That's going to lead to more hallucinations and a further decay of trust.
Well, if that comes to fruition, I would love to have you both come back on and we'll chat about it more in the future. We'll see if our predictions came true. In the meantime, Jason, how can people stay in contact with you and follow some of your thought leadership?
Yeah, you can follow me or just email me at jhamrick@phase2.io or just visit phase2.io. I'm also, of course, on LinkedIn at Jason Hamrick, as is Phase2 at Phase2.
Excellent. And Mike, how can we stay in contact with you?
I'm at iPullRank on all the things. You can also email me, Mike@iPullRank.com.
And you have a big event coming up in a couple of weeks. I know we're going to be there. Tell us more about SEO Week and how we can maybe connect with you face to face.
Yeah, SEO Week is the 27th through the 30th. We have 40 of the best speakers speaking on AI search and all the things search, in the world. We also have a really cool after party concert that we're throwing with the Locks and Method Man and myself. And it's going to be a great time. So if you check out SEOweek.org, you can learn more about it and get a ticket.
Oh, amazing. I'm so excited. I'm definitely going to be there. And then for the rest of you, if you were interested in seeing the consumer research that we showed, it is now live. I think Logan has some links to that. You can check out Yext research. And then we also have a podcast. It's called The Visibility Brief. You can keep up to date with us there. And of course, keep an eye out for any future webinars. Mike, Jason, thank you so much. This was absolutely incredible. You were so generous with your time. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Thanks for having us,
everybody.